Впрочем, я хочу сказать,
I would like to say, for that matter, I want to say that some things we are taking notice of and remember. Bear in mind you, that quite something that is this talking as you turn your back on the audience and you have a very long talk. It's not really anything that is welcome in this audience. Secondly, second part of this story so far, it still exists on day one. You should all come, at least 75–80% sooner should be in before the expert is in the room. And thirdly, and it's only thirdly, quality of questions. And I want to say that for this matter, in my deliberation, you exceed our expectations. But other things, I suppose, we'll have to take into consideration for the... Yes, and firstly, when we arrange these seminars, I don't know where Ina is, but you will later meet her. When we are preparing this seminar, we look very carefully at direction, without trying to diminish your dignity. Absolute priority for all who we invited to attend this seminar, both professionally in the expert capacity and in human relations. It matters certainly. But an expert like Alexey Kara-Murza, certainly, do you all know Karamzin? Do? Well, this is one of his ancestors. He wrote a history, imperial history, that now we have Crimea, the Crimea with us. And imperial, to be liked by the emperor. And he changed his name to be liked by the emperor. Actually, his real name was Kara-Murza. So I want to say that this is one of the best experts of this school, so that you should remember this day and the accent that he puts on this, and the passion and belief in each and every one of us and our culture, and into things that really quite a lot depends upon us. This all was heard at the end of the day, and will be heard at the end of the day. Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Lena. Well, this story is going on for many, many years. I keep inventing all kinds of topics for my presentation, but I'm sort of tense in listening how she presents me. And this is an unexpected twist. If you want to have to Karamzin, then you will have the Crimea, and here is Kara-Murza. He will speak about civic enlightenment, about freedom, and so on. I do not see it as such an alternative. Nikolai Mikhailovich was long ago forgiven. Yeah, well, in my family way, I think that at the beginning of his career, my career, when I was your age, he was an excellent pro-European, pro-liberal philosopher. But people change with age, and as they age. And I want Moscow School of Political Studies, which is now known as Moscow School of Civic Enlightenment, should remain as young as its audience. So do let us, our duel should continue. I must acknowledge that every cloud has a silver lining. I like actually the name of this school much better, the new name. It's more exact. The thing is that in inertia we're still dealt in politics, although politics is no longer... for 10 years, it's not been around. And this side of this, at the venue of the Moscow School of Political Studies, we were actually studying what our politics could be like, would be like. What is the name we would choose for what is left over of the politics here? We lost policy and politics. But I want to say that politics and policy always a projection of civic feeling and civic sentiment and civic moods. For this reason, when here my comrade Lev Gudkov yet another time presented these changing moods in the Russian political mind, I kept thinking, well, is there some kind of new twist of civic sentiment? Is it maybe some special understanding? Or does it mean we have absolutely lost civic immunity and then things are really bad with us? I don't really claim I know the answer to this question, and thank goodness I'm not the one responsible for giving an answer to this question. I'm supposed to talk on civic enlightenment. After I've agreed, actually, I realized that I go to the heart of the matter, because all my colleagues keep telling what is going on with somebody else. Whereas I dared into a subject that seeks to answer the question what we are all sitting here doing here. With this new class, which I welcome, because among previous classes I now have many friends and colleagues, because I mostly work with the regions as president of the Foundation Russian Liberal Heritage. This is my objective, that at first I travel much less when somebody invites me to travel as Karamzin, Letters of the Russian Traveller, Switzerland, France, England, Northern Italy. I want to travel this path, and I won't travel about Russia, about Russian province, where indeed this is actually where they will actually take the decision whether civic culture and civic enlightenment will it stay or not. In this sense, Moscow is my own hometown. We have been around from 1604. This is where my family arrived in Moscow, 1604. I am sort of person with a Moscow, and I'm a person from region. I have my own ideas how my region, Moscow region, should develop. But I'm more interested in listening to what you have to say about how your regions develop. And if you focus your questions on this, I will be very happy to answer this question, because in the last 10 years I've visited over 50 regions in this country, and in over 40 of them I suppose I did something good to revive the memory about Russian citizens, highest class, who lived in your regions. And maybe some of you may remember me, although I do not very much hope for this, because generations certainly change, and the apogee of our activity was some 10 years ago. That was the height of our activity. But we may be passing by those sites, by those places where these memorials of belonging to people of the alternative culture, of civic culture. Sometimes they mix up, as Saltykov-Shchedrin used to say, for some reason, Russian citizens call patriots people who love not their country, but love their bosses, their leaders. But the citizen should at all times have to justify, whereas if he's a patriot or not. So civic and patriotic culture, this is what interests me, and this is what I'm doing. Since my background, my PhD is in history, my main specialty is then I'm a philosopher, and I'm a philosopher, political philosopher first and foremost. And I'm in charge of the Department of Institute of Philosophy in the Russian Academy of Sciences. But to a certain degree, I think I'm a political scientist, because I'm in charge of the Department of Applied Political Science in Moscow Academic Institute of Humanities. This is under academic institutes, this is what we used to be called the Russian Academy of Education. The institutes are there, but the academy is gone. There are two departments there, philosophy and political science. This is my competence. History, some philosophical deliberations, attempt to make political projections of all this. And since the philosopher, from the very start, if he's a professional, should set the framework for our talk, means I have to suggest to you some notions, some language which we will later use to talk. If you like it, certainly, if you like it. Many people used to like it. This is where you could have a very good conversation. That's why I want to suggest two things to you, which will set framework for our conversation. A conversation about civic enlightenment in Russia, about its fate, about its history, about its problems, and about its prospects. First thing I want to say is I want to remind my beloved Alexander Ivanovich Herzen, where we commemorated 200 years since his birth. And as we sit here, we made an input because our state did not celebrate 200 years since Herzen was born. It's amazing that under communists, that would mean that there will be a ceremonial meeting headed by the deputy general secretary of the CPSU in the best audience. Whereas here, the international conference was held in the Institute for Philosophy, but it was for good reason. Because Herzen was investigated when they opened the first criminal case in 1834-1835 for singing abusive and derogatory songs about his bosses. Then he was exiled, banished to Perm, to Novgorod, Vladimir. So investigation committee actually worked with which is still the venue of the Institute of Philosophy of the Academy of Science. So it's a good place, they chosen the right place. Herzen came into being as a citizen just in the building where we now is our institute is. So Herzen, I suppose, is the cornerstone of our talk. He says, in Russia, the thing about politics was always not bad, and it was always bad in terms of many parties. But two parties in Russia have always been around and shall forever stay and will be eternal while Russia is around. They are the party of people's popular enlightenment and party of popular endarkment. Two-party system, bipartisan system will stay in Russia. Actually, I long ago abandoned politics, but it is my pleasure now to think that I'm now here in the presence of like-minded people in my political views, belonging to the same party. So, dear colleagues, we now play for this team of political enlightenment. And there were people who used to play. Against us, a very strong team is playing. Regrettably, whatever is going on right now, as I see it, this is the main thing. Continuing the ideas by Herzen, is that the party of popular endarkment seems to be winning. For that matter, it has always had an advantage in this country. In this country, one of the person who calls himself conservative but ill-enlightened, as I think he's just a fool. So he used to say, never say this country, say my country, our country. But I say, but for me country, it's this country, you know? In Russia, it's very, very, very derogative. But when you speak ours, you don't think to like this country, you seem to like something else. So I like this country, I like our country. They used to say in Russia, and Herzen used to speak about that too, but the paradox is that here sometimes the main people who work for darkening is, say, the minister of a popular enlightenment. That was his name for Uvarov. Then he used this name to call Count Dmitry Tolstoy. Then he would say guys like Pobedonoscev and Koso, who then in 1911 students, he would send them to become soldiers to do national service. They were certainly leaders of the party. But the fact that we're not celebrating Herzen's anniversary, it seems they have suspected him of being something foreign to Russia, something alien. As Guberman used to say, as I fought for the popular cause, I was a foreign element. So Herzen is not a foreign alien body. He's a great Russian man who worked for Russian Enlightenment, certainly with many mistakes he committed. Very serious and cultured person. Wanted to share his knowledge with somebody else. For him, there was nothing higher than debate and discussion. There was no greater value in life. This is the first thing for him. So people for the Enlightenment against people for endarkment. If you follow this criteria, then more things you get to understand more and more, because there's right and left, conservatives and liberals. Well, I don't think that these just these self-assumed names, they work. Nothing really stands behind them. Just look in depth. People pro-enlightenment and pro-darkening. Pro-darkening, they are enlightened at all. We would very much want them to be. But they want to enlighten others, because in Russia we do have these snobs who are satisfied with their own enlightenment and are quite skeptical about possibility of democratic enlightenment, civic enlightenment, national enlightenment here. People like this try to be next to the government, and sometimes they make an excellent career there. As long as you don't go for civic enlightenment. Okay, Count Uvarov, Minister of Education. He was best educated man of his time. I used to write a lot about him. When he was 25, he by his own right became the active member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, was for a long time, but he didn't want to do anything for the popular enlightenment. He was just this like sort of chewing gum motto, like autocracy, orthodoxy, and patriotism. This is what he called him. But in his small village of Uvarovka next to Gzhatsk, they just wore ancient Roman togas, spoke about elevated matters, but for others, millions, this sort of motto, autocracy, orthodoxy, patriotism. This is the first thing I want to say. People for enlightenment and for endowment. But the second question is, what are we doing it for? What type of personality do we want to cultivate? Who are we counting upon here? And this is where, like another, phrase by somebody who is very close to me, who lived in the 20th century, our emigre philosopher, Georgy Petrovich Fedotov. Much regrettably, his peak is, we've passed his peak, although in Saratov I erected a memorial plaque to Fedotov and Ayatskov. Ayatskov at that time even erected a monument to Stolypin, and then I just followed path, and at that time he listened to me and heard me, and I was very happy. I'm not now in the position to find out why he did help me, thank goodness. So Fedotov said one thing, although he was a professional historian, it's not because he didn't understand anything, for good reason, quite the opposite. He knew many things that, people, like common people do not know. He says, epochs in global history, what makes it different is not just these isms like feudalism, socialism, communism, or some of these economic theories. It's all certainly matters, and matters a lot. But the fundamental division in human history is about what type of personality. It's not that it is in government that dominates. Who feels comfortable here? He identified only 3 types of personality in history, and it has nothing to do with, say, elites alone. This is very much an in-depth, fundamental, anthropological human type, and you will now see that it applies to basically all of us, not only those who are on the top, but those who are near us. Well, in the Russian manner, the first category, he called them Держи морда, that is the Russian character, means police, very tough and rigid people who are conservative, hardliners. Because when you say conservative, it sounds very proud. In many cases, I'm also liberal conservative too, or rather conservative liberal, if you will. But those who are just watchdogs, those who are like, I know how difficult it must be in the international audience to translate. It is indeed. Those who are listening to what I'm saying, Держи морда, they try to hold my, it's not even the face, they use a very rude word. It's in the line of Saltykov and Chekhov. This is very, very much part and parcel. It means not to allow something to happen, yes, to drag them away, to hold, to bar them, and to just, I wouldn't even start this conversation if I didn't know that we have brilliant interpreters. Thank you. Unfortunately, the interpreters cannot always keep up with this sort of. So those who are hardliners, hardcore hardliners, who just stick to their butt, stick to the position they hold with their butt, and this is seen in every sort of level of social ladder. You want to look up immediately. No, it's very far from this. Fedotov used to say those who can would stay where they are. They are pushing people away, they don't allow them in, and they're dragging people. The very last small character of the Russian literature, Akakiy Akakievich, who is the last person, but at home, before his wife, he might act very much like a goon, this would be the word, a goon. another second human, or rather second human type. This is a revolutionary, this is a radical, a demagogue. Though that one is long live, this one says down with, down with. He's never happy, he never works, but he speaks a lot, he's always speaking. This person is ready to do a lot to be heard. He mostly is not appeals to the ratio. He rather speaks in a very loud voice, and this tone has many decibels. And this sort of personality is very popular in Russia because people listen to him carefully. Our people love decibels, means very loud voice. If he says it means that there is something behind it. If he shouts out loud, it means that he knows something. But since there is nothing you can hear in what he says, then there is no way you can check it, because those demagogues, these noisy, loud radicals, they often come to rule in the government. And what, as Fedotov says, they immediately turns into goons, into those hardcore hardliners. Just say, no way, people. And the only way they can govern and manage is using this old grip of just not... There's these two types sort of intertwined in Russia, and they turn... It's time. Semyon Yulievich Frank. Today I heard that he was mentioned at one of the first sittings as I was watching you online on my computer. I suppose Sasha Zakharov mentioned him for some reason. So he used to say, look, I was surprised in 1922 he was banished from Russia on a ship of philosophers. He said, in my yard, the very same man kept shouting against the Jews in 1904. He was just like rousing public discontent. Then he roused discontent against the Germans in 1914, organizing pogroms against the Germans, as he used to do against the Jews. And after Bolshevik, and he was very much like the one who was doing pogroms against the bourgeoisie. It was the very same person. Can we claim he's dark, he's right, he's left, he's brown, he's red? He's not. And this category of people is now in government, because if they don't speak too loud when they can suppress everybody else with just shouting out. It's like king of the mountain. The one who reached the top is the one who survives. Okay, what is the third category that Fedotov, and this is the only one which he counts upon. He calls them builders, people who work for construction of something new. He says this en masse type in Russia, it has always been around. It was not very much noticeable, but Peter the Great gave him some fresh air, because he was the one, he was always, this is a quote to Pushkin, that he was always working and building. I know that he was not. He was quite, he could really, for that matter, to punish and to execute people, or rather award them for the same sort of thing they did. That is what Russia responded with Lomonosov and Pushkin. That was Russia's response to Peter I. He was a true creative class, not the one, this office plankton that some people think, oh, here they are, creative class. Well, you can see that they are not really into anything constructive. They are not into building something new. They are conformist, for that matter. They have very little, if at all, civic education, though I'm not prepared to write them off. In the 20th century, we lived through a huge anthropologic disaster. Pitserim Sorokin, he was a secretary in Kerensky's government. He was also banished in 1922. He didn't go on a ship, he went on a train, a philosopher's train. And this is where he became an outstanding sociologist, a chairman of American sociology and then Global Congress. So he said, look, yes, we used to have statehood, which was not the best, but society, okay, it was not probably the best, but when it broke down, could you really create anything better than what was there of the best, when the best on the both sides were destroyed on both sides. Some people were banished. About 4 million best educated people in Russia were exiled. Were banished and exiled. Some immediately died. So what do you do with this anthropological material? Do you think you can come up with something better than what was the case before? And there is a grain of truth, and it shouldn't really upset any of us, because we're all rising from this black soil, from our forefathers who survived by resisting. There's discussion about very smart and clever questions that you asked Gutkov, and I hope you will also ask questions in me, and I very strongly hope. And when they said, do we need to put the blame? Well, there's self-criticism and there is self-debasement. But some people begin to just debase themselves, and this is something that I don't think is right. There's self-humiliation. This is not exaggerated self-humiliation, but this is not about this. Yes, we all are products of that epoch. And honestly speaking, I think that the overwhelming majority of our co-citizens, very much like their forefathers, for this matter, they don't need to cover their hair with ash. Okay, we acquired some skills of fighting the totalitarian regime. Only our people succeeded in preventing a huge danger of Nazism with fascist and Italian and all kinds of satellites. But then they knew how to deal with our own totalitarianism. Maybe not fully, not in the best sense. But still, apart from the guilt, we have huge reasons to be proud of. I'm saying that society as a whole, socialism as a whole, not somebody in person, you know. Well, so these builders or people who can build something new, only a state and only a society can flourish and prosper where these people, who third type builders, dominate everywhere, in economy, in politics, in spirituality, in culture. They're creative everywhere. They're always building in something new. They find themselves in a very difficult situation if they are into going against these goons, these hardliners, and against radicals, demagogue radicals. But where they can get some ground, this is where they first of all ensure self-survival and
for the society to flourish, maybe fragmentary, maybe not irrevocable, but when we see just what it takes for other countries to flourish, Japan and China, so they're flourishing. So what do they do? How they do that? In all the national specifics. So just look, if they succeeded. It's always just the domineering factor. It's the person who's a creator, the builder. And so once we understand that, when we understand this slogan, this maxim, so this assumption, so because we are designing our own myths, the myths that destroy us, so we need to fight them because the way Russia was conquered can be likened to the way the United States was conquered. So because they went from the west to the east, and Americans from the same kind of process. It was kind of simultaneous. So they made it into a myth. So Americans made it into a myth. So then a free person in a free land. That's a myth, wonderful myth. So suddenly there was bloodshed. So they tortured Indians and they killed them, murder, blood. And so then they're fighting for the equality of rights and rules. And but they managed just, so they just put it as foundation. So the common denominator is the free person in free land. And so we are a huge country, and so we decided. So the emperor sent us, and we went. Although we know that actually, so the free people conquered the east of Russia, and not anyone just who. It was not the emperor who gave the order just to conquer the east. It is the people, free people, courageous, industrious, adventurers out there. So they went there for themselves, free people. And that's a myth that the emperor sent us there to conquer. And they're quite different. And the foundation is different. And so what we can So we should don't take anything on trust. Don't believe. Don't take on trust any political slogans. So because Russia, unfortunately, bought into this. Because the irony of the situation is that in any project, however good it started, eventually the builders suffered from what they did. And that's our revolution during the Tsarist times. They wanted to free, but then for some reason, so the intelligentsia and the engineers were all slaughtered. And so when so remember the boat. So in the 20s, who would just put the philosophers, historians, or put on board of that boat and sent to Europe. And the philosophers' boat. So the majority, doctors, teachers, philosophers were only about 30 guys. And so the most creative, the best. So the builders in a wide sense of the word, the creators. So they were put on board of that boat and sent away. And that's we have a dearth of those people right now. And so then big transformations during the 20th century. So the irony is that the class of creators rotted away. So everyone flourished, but the builders, the creators. So during the heady 90s, so most of them became petty merchants, and the majority went abroad, emigrated. That's exactly what happened. So 50% of creative class wanted to go abroad. So what's the point of having such a country if 50% of the most creative, it's not your country anymore? So then people went to extremes. So they realized that this is the dead end. So there is not much else they can do. So they had to go. So what the country had to do with those people just to make them think about immigration. And because some people speak about. So don't be afraid of the word property. Property is okay. Property is fine, because this is the classicism of liberalism. It's property. So we have the right to our own life and to where we live. So we can own our lives, and we can own the place where we live. So don't get bought into ideological names, false names. So remember Kazima Protkov. If you see an elephant and it says, and the plaque says the bull, so don't trust your eyes. And Leo Tolstoy. So a young Bunin just came to visit. Tolstoy just shortly before Tolstoy's death came to visit a young guy, and so they talked. So one very old, one very young. Although that he was Pushkin's award, so the young rising star Bunin was, and so we can quote him. So they talked to each other, and eventually Tolstoy said, the 9/10 of all the problems in the world are because of human folly, stupidity. So the rest can be checked, can be refurbished, can be improved. So because ignorant and unenlightened are two different things. So, but they certainly coincide. And Leo Tolstoy to Bunin said the following story, told him the following story. We had a team of young writers of your age. When I was young, he was saying to Bunin. And then there was one guy who joined us. It's very poor. Very poor. And then all of a sudden, so his bottom penny, so his last ruble he bought, so he bought a metallic, wind-up canary. So then the young guys, so what does it mean? Started to think about it. Why did he want to buy that canary, mechanic canary? And then maybe he's just a fool. That's the first thing that occurred to me. And that's exactly. Turned out to be he just was a bloody fool. That's why he bought this metal canary. Don't overthink. So if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. And just always remember our school of enlightenment, civil enlightenment. So there were many good reliable breaks. For example, so proper teaching of classical Russian literature. Now it's being deleted from curriculums. I don't know whether they teach problems with wisdom or whatever, problems, the misfortune from the intellect. So famous Griboyedov's. So they say we know exactly who is a demagogue, who is stupid, who is smart. So I can't say that Chatsky is a creator because he has not yet found himself. He has not found his feet, but he's got very good, solid, robust. But there are lots of bullies in the world, and bullies are there in that piece of art. Lots of demagogues. So Repetilov is one of the, and with Kalazub, so he's just talking to him. So another character, another protagonist, demagogue and a bully. And so for 30 years I work at the Institute of Philosophy, and now I realize that Kalazub called himself a philosopher. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine himself calling himself a philosopher? But I, as a philosopher, so then career, the positions, whatever, he tried to explain it philosophically. And so those guys, they ruled Russia for a long period of time. And you understand why I learned it only yesterday. It's still fresh on me. And so when Kalazub called himself a philosopher, and it's a psychoanalytical replacement. So there was this Adis guy, horrible, Moscow governor, general governor Anton Zakrevsky was a very bad personality. So then Zakrevsky, so that's someone that Pushkin hated his guts. And then the general governor after Nicholas I, so was afraid of the European revolutions. Yes, but then he did something wrong to the Minister of Interior. So he was the one who oppressed Lermontov and Gogol. So that's a disgusting guy. And so Kalazub mated with Famusov, so would be someone like that general governor, bad guy. So like Hebels of the 18th century. I don't know who's worse than him. So he was the person who, so he went to the Mali Theater, and he saw Shepkin, a wonderful actor, and he comes home, and it's very late, so he writes a letter to Binkendorf about Shepkin. So now I know this guy is capable of anything. So he's an actor, so talented, very talented actor, and he is writing a letter so to Binkendorf. This guy is capable of anything. For 12 years he held the post of general governor. So Alexander II relieved him of his. He was very, very efficient. But many were afraid. They were silent. They didn't speak up. And yesterday saw the foundation Russian World, Ruski Mir. And I learned it yesterday, organizes in Florence a memorial event in memory of Anton Zakrevsky. Yes, so this is Russian tax money at work. Can you imagine that? Because yes, we're pooling our resources, but there are guys who take money from the budget. So they found some Italians, and they explained that he was the hero of the war of 1812 and head of Moscow. So Italians, they love bosses too. But when you strike out Pushkin, Gogol, Granovsky, and others, so who thought that Chadai was crazy, and so they don't explain that. Maybe stupid. Maybe just they are stupid. Just plain stupid. The guys who are buying mechanic canaries. So died in Florence in 1865. So let's do a project with the talents. But the foundation, the Russian world, there should be enlightened, educated people there. And I don't think that I think that did it on purpose. I don't think that they were not aware of what kind of guy that Zakrevsky was. So kind of so anti-liberal, mockery. Because you said that Zakrevsky is a bully, but we're going just to put a memorable plaque on the wall in Florence. And so then the Florence Society, that's thinking, what this is all about? Tchaikovsky composed the Queen of Spades. Dostoevsky wrote his Idiot. Then Brodsky got his first recognition. So the last years of his life were spent there. Tarkovsky lived there the last years of his life. And so then, and our Russia, they went never, the Russians never helped to memorize someone's memory. So we never did that, to immortalize someone's memory. So Berdyaev, for example, he lived in Florence the last years of his life. So Italians are ready, Russians are not ready. Yeah, and Zakrevsky just with flying colors immediately, goes for an award. And so this is going to happen in March, and so it's not yet there, but the celebration may be coming up. So the game is going on. And so it's not the national enlightenment, it's national endarkment. Because I'm not dealing with pure problems, because some people like to speak in general, but I like to speak specifically in a more concrete fashion. Yeah, because I want it to be down to earth. I want to stand on the ground and so to see how it evolved in a person, how he got to be what he got to be. And to give some examples, so let's say more than 40 projects in 10 years, the foundation of Russian liberal legacy organized them. And so now I would like just to have a nice conversation later. Granovsky was born. So the central figure of Russian civil enlightenment of the middle of the 19th century, Timofey Granovsky, the best professor of Moscow State University, the best. And naturally, so 200th anniversary of birth of Granovsky wanted to commemorate. So theoretically, Moscow State University should be doing that because he worked there, so he died very young. So what did he do? So what was his contribution? Yeah, so there's this Granovsky circle, graduate students who came to visit. So then he became dean, so they didn't allow him because it was the Russia of Nicholas I. And then he started to read public lectures, then medieval European history, that was the subject matter. People just were trying to get in, because everyone just were talking about the epoch of Merovingian, and that. But he is talking not about the France, but he was speaking about Russia. And actually he was lisping, and he was not Cicero. And it was not very eloquent. People just were listening, they were hanging on his lips. I was in Moscow State University, where he lectured, and this famous conference room was recently renovated. Now just we know what it looked like when Granovsky was there. And in this conference room, that holds no more than 300 people. Even if you're standing, no mics, so lisping, no amplification for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And everyone just was listening, hanging on their lips, buying tickets, to get in. And then many were saying, "Who are you?" So the person just, "I listen to Granovsky lectures." That already made for a lot. So he made his reputation. He was buried in Krestovsky Cemetery, famous cemetery. And so student pulled money, and so they put a big monument. So he was a dean, but the state did not plan to contribute any money, and so they collected money, and for 50 years, on the day of the burial until 1917, students would come, children of students, grandchildren of those students, and so who remember themselves, the members of the party of People's Enlightenment, People's Education, because there were no parties. They appeared only in 1905, 1906, so they were allowed. But the party of Granovsky has always was there after his death. And people just would come just from distant, remote outstations, and they would come and visit and pay their tributes to Granovsky. Let me give you another example, which is a very powerful argument for those who say sometimes that liberals are people not needed, and Granovsky is a person whose existence and importance is questionable. So he was coming back to Moscow or something, and he was sick. And so he met some people's militia who were losing this war, the Crimea War, and so were just going there, were fighting, but losing the war. And the Nizhny Novgorod militia, so they realized, so there were the officers there, some officers who went to the university and listened to Granovsky's lectures. And so they organized the party, and they said, Timofey Nikolaevich, you know what, how is it going on? Everyone who went and listened to your lectures, no one refused to go into the army. Everyone volunteered, everyone, not drafted, but volunteered. Everyone went to the front, everyone. But who did not listen to your lectures, who just listened to another. So that's autocracy, nationality, etc. And everyone tried just to get away from the war, and so they did not volunteer. So they were just replacing people. So the peasants, they would just send to the war, but never went. But all disciples of Granovsky, not a single person refused the honor to go to the war as a volunteer. And then Granovsky dictates a letter to his wife as a volunteer. I understood what the position of a professor of Moscow State University means. So 2 months before his death. So there are some strange people who call themselves liberals. Granovsky was not the guy who was prohibited during Soviet power. So there was even the museum of Granovsky. Lenin spoke well about Granovsky. So it's one of the events. So the Soviet power was not against it. So the first thing they do, so they ripped away the plaque of Granovsky from his wall, from the wall of the building there where he lived, and so in Vladimir Novgorod. So they ripped off the plaques of Gertsen and others. So he was a revolutionary Democrat, so it said, but they removed it. But Lenin loved Herzen, but that was a good enough ground just for the new mechanic canary guys, bullies or stupid guys, certainly not creators. They ripped off the plaques of Herzen and the plaques of Granovsky from the walls of the buildings where they lived. Another very important person, very close to my heart, because where I worked for 30 years, the mansion of Golitsyns, Chicherin, Boris Chicherin. So Herzen was questioned there, but Boris Chicherin, the biggest professor of law and a philosopher, rented an apartment there, and so he worked at Moscow Duma, and then when the Prince Sherbatov retired, so no one wanted to to get into his shoes. And then, then the chairman, so he was appointed chairman of the Executive Assembly. So the merchants came to Chicherin. So the merchants came to Chicherin. So he is sitting and writing something, and so he is. So he was his famous book. So the property of the state, and they told him. So Boris Nikolaevich, we want to to appoint you to Moscow city head. So now, are you joking? I go to Duma and I said, no, you'll be the great, wonderful Moscow head of Moscow because you're a liberal, so the merchant said. So they were saying it to him. And liberals, as we know, they're not thieves. They're not thieves. That's why we would like to promote you. And they voted for him almost unanimously. And he was head of Moscow for 4 years. And so the Moscow owes him the water supply, centralized water supply. So then sewage. So the system of transportation he changed. So they paved the streets. So it's organized electrical lighting, everything. So this a liberal Moscow head. Yeah. Because they say that liberals can't do anything. That's a myth. No, he could do that because he was not a thief. And secondly, because he thought in a holistic, comprehensive manner. Because how it was organized it? So first they collected taxes, then someone started construction, so then the money was spent or was stolen, and then so the construction stopped. And then it was by fits and starts. The construction stopped, and some more money was allocated that was stolen. So he borrowed the Western model. So when the state, so Moscow power, it's not a local self-governance. Moscow authorities, so against the collateral, with the collateral Moscow property, so they borrowed money for the construction process, and the money changed hands only once the construction was over. So the world has been operating like that for many years, but why? So why shouldn't we just borrow this system? Because the budget exists for the single purpose of being stolen. So that's how Chechen worked. And so this system worked. So the tragic figure. So this building where his office is the last one. They destroyed a lot, and then this Tambovsk in Tambov. So he had a mansion, and today. So if we have anyone from Tambov, they can talk a lot about that. And they burnt it down. So one of the sentries buildings where the sentries lived, and then they blew up. They were looking for gold, and they blew up the Chechens, where the place where Chechen was buried, because they were looking for gold. They thought that he was very rich, then he said once, so if you want for Russia to be good and evolve, so we need to concentrate on self-governance, and then so there was the coronation of Alexander III in 1883, 2 years after his father had been murdered. And so Chechen managed to collect a lot of money. And he was saying, so we are in alliance with monarchy and orthodoxy and autocracy, but the society should support these principles. And then for these words, support the state, he was sacked. And Sergei Andreevich Muromtsev, many know him, although he was born in Moscow, but he came from the city of Orel. Orel, they just set up a monument to him, but it's just a miracle that they managed just so there was a young governor there, and he was standing next to me, so we're unveiling this monument together. So Muromtsev, his motivation, one of the leaders of the party of cadets, so the first chairman of the Moscow Duma. He was a dissident because he signed something rebellious, and so he was put in Taganka prison, and he got a cold and developed pneumonia and died at 40. So he was saying a speech, so he's a good guy, so that young governor, but he was digressing. He was saying something wrong because the speech was written by someone that I know. So then the word liberal was struck out, and instead of liberal, it was written a conservator, the guy who is conservative. Liberal was struck out, and the word conservative replaced it. So there is this monument in Orel, but in Moscow, the Moscow State Duma does not okay any place where this monument could be erected, because we should have done it when we celebrated the 150th anniversary since his death. And so this is the civil enlightenment, civil education. This is and 1910. So he was released from Taganka prison, became again the rector of the university. So quiet, timid, sick professor, and when he dies of the heart failure, so then the whole of Moscow became restless. So 200,000 people followed his coffin. So then the guy just when the Moscow Duma was dispelled, and who in 1910 spent time in prison, and so 200,000, because he was a symbol of Russian constitutionalism. So in 1910, you can imagine 200,000 people just following the coffin. And there's even a movie. I wanted to copy some of it, and so that's a lot of money. So for every minute, so there will be some discounts. So 40 minutes, only the burial, nothing else. 40 minutes. So that's the footage lasts. And who's going to watch? Okay, we'll find some money, yes, but who's going to watch the burial of that guy? So, like in the previous discussion. So the people won't like this. It will be very depressing to watch. So 10,000 people follow the coffin. It will be depressing. People won't watch it. They won't like. And so one general governor, Moscow general governor, learned that this kind of burial is getting organized. So they called St. Petersburg the capital. So we need to ban it. Said what?
That was the years of the Stolypin reactionary times. And the dean, or rather the rector of the Moscow University, Mr. Manoilov, who used to be the Secretary of State, he had that rank. So he called to the minister of the court, the royal court, and he said that I can assume responsibility for the order during the funerals. My students will see to it. But what about the police? The question came. Well, the rector said that we have to take care of police, and we have about 200,000 students, and we really try to consult, and if the answer is that if the police has to show up, please let them not wear a uniform, not to irritate the students, and it was done. So for the entire day, the funeral procession, a funeral rally, stretched from the Sretensky monastery to the cemetery. So out of 5 speakers of the State Duma before the revolution, just one deserved such an honor. So Mr. Morozov was buried with all that glory and honor, because he didn't last till the revolutionary days. Golovin's tomb is not known where. Garamekin was buried by French. Batashov is buried in Croatia. And that was the fate of the speakers of the State Duma. So the state didn't do anything. Monument to Zakrevsky was erected in Florence, and but Muromsky's memory is forgotten. Nobody helped to restore the monument to Khomykov. It was done by the students in Dubrovnik at their own expense. And that was also a great leader. And just imagine how many people just left unnoticed, people who could really keep Russia alive. And the struggle between the light forces and forces of darkness is continuing, I think. Your schedule for this week is great, and you are really the people who are opposing the forces of darkness, and that's a real struggle, and the fate and destiny of Russia depends on that struggle, on the outcome of that struggle, and that is why I wish every success to you and to the school. So, colleagues, we have half an hour for Q&A and discussion on, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for a great lesson of civic education. I'm Radvan from Yaroslavl. Following your topic about Morozov, last year we brought the daughter-in-law of Morozov to Moscow, and she presented her book of memoirs, and Morozov's name is not forgotten. But my question is as follows. I think that the civic education in Russia can be compared with a great deed or with a real struggle, because it's opposed by both those who are enlightened and the power. Do you think that it's possible to promote civic education against the will of those who are educated? Will it be efficient under the circumstances? First of all, I'd like to convey my great wishes to the city of Yaroslavl. We did 3 projects there. Morozov visited Yaroslavl on numerous occasions. He liked Yaroslavl, but he was not born there. And we have some monuments erected in Yaroslavl to Count Urusov, for instance, and we did the same in Kaluga. And certainly here comes Dmitry Ivanovich Shakhovskoy. We commemorate his great performance, and the Shakhovskoy family was very famous for their deeds, and one of the members of the family was executed, and Nekrasov, our great writer and poet, published a magazine back in 19th century, and I think there will be more projects in Yaroslavl, so we can keep on talking. You know, those are such great people, and to remember. And you say, as you put it, is it really against the will of the people? Nobody measured that will. We don't have normal politics. We don't have normal elections. The Levada Center measures public opinion, and it's a problem how they measure it. And my attitude to any measurement of public opinion in the place where there is no public opinion at all, I'm really very skeptical, and it's our task to do so that it would be measured properly. When I come to the regions, hundreds of people listen to us. When we inaugurate monuments, people listen to us. It is followed by press conferences. It's hard to promote, but we're trying to do that. And it's not only for the people of Yaroslavl, but I can say that local patriotism is the most powerful instrument for civic education. If you come to Yaroslavl and just tell people what's popular in Moscow, nobody would listen to you. If you keep telling people about Shakhovskoy, Urusov, or Nekrasov, it will be totally different. Ms. Terkova-Williams published, with the help of the school, a book which is entitled Roads to Freedom. It's a great book. It's sold out long ago, And that lady came from Novgorod. She belonged to a noble family, but she worked a lot in Yaroslavl. So when you start telling people about her in Yaroslavl and Novgorod, you just attract crowds of people. So responding to a question, I can see only one way out. We cannot predict the responses, but I can see that the current responses are positive if you treat your people right. If I interpret your question, it means that why should we care about people if they don't care about themselves? But again, it's not the case. You should really respect your people. There was a magazine which was called The Herald of Europe. He died in 2011 on civil society. In 1911 he died, and people wanted to really commemorate his death and erect a very great monument to that person as a leader of the civil education. And Stasilevich was supposed to be buried there first, because he was the editor-in-chief of that magazine, and the editorial board really respected the people they published the magazine for, and Mr. Stasilevich was not a poor man, and he made great donations to the magazine. There was a subscriber from Khabarovsk, and just one subscriber, a major, who served in artillery, and certainly from the economic point of view, it was not reasonable to send that single copy to Khabarovsk, to the other end of the country, but certainly it was worth that, because even one sound person matters in the cause of civic education. Well, that single subscriber was the subject of numerous jokes, but he always received all the copies. And that's something that is important for feedback. We cannot rank people or categorize people as someone who do not want to be enlightened or educated. Our chances are quite high, and in Yaroslavl we have a lot of capable people. Okay, so your question, please, in the second row. Good evening. Will introduce yourself. I'm Irina Kozlovtseva from Volgograd. Several years ago, we heard that in the State Duma they had an idea to rename the city of Volgograd to Stalingrad. Certainly there were a lot of voices for and against, and very recently, last Friday, Putin said he wouldn't mind if people vote for that. So what do you think of that? Is it a useful idea, and how reasonable will it be? Just one of the few cases when I agree with Mr. Putin. We should really listen to the opinion of the citizens. But I really don't recommend to invite the chairman of the Electoral Commission to count the votes. That's a hard question for me as the son of the soldier of World War II. My father was very seriously wounded in Stalingrad. He was the captain in the artillery units, and one of his best friends who became very famous, he became a poet, Mr. Dalmatovsky, and he wrote post-mortem in the Red Star newspaper on the death of my father. And certainly my father fought for Stalingrad. But I'm a regional person, and Moscow, I'm preoccupied with Moscow, and let the people of Volgograd take care of themselves. I'm not going to invent any ideologically biased explanations. Let them decide with all pros and cons. But I can only repeat by saying that the counting is to be very accurate. And if there is a referendum, there should be full freedom, and all regional press should really cover different opinions. I'm certain that there will be a lot of demagogical outcries and statements, ideologically dressed and covered, and there will be appeals to orthodoxy, to morale, and to a number of other high-level notions. But if you think of a liberal, starting from John Tork, liberal is based on theology and religion. Liberals believe that people are designed along the Lord's lines, and freedom is a gift from the Lord, and those who try to violate the freedom goes against the Lord. And taken that into account, and I visited Volgograd many times, and I think that the city, for the sake of Russian liberalism, is not that good as Yaroslavl or even as Saratov. But compared with what happened during World War II, it's history, and what I would expect, not the outcome of voting, but very serious dialogue. If you can take advantage of that to really start a serious dialogue on the price the Soviet Union paid for the victory, so then probably the outcome will not be that important, when people will be purified and through the discussion and truth. And to a certain extent, I'm envious of you, because you can serve the platform for a trial run of the opposition of opinions. But again, don't ask the chairman of the Electoral Commission to count the voices, but don't invite those foolish liberals from Moscow. Stalin won his Stalingrad, and those silly liberals are on air all the time on purpose, because they are really foes. And T-shirts may read anything, but my father, who survived the Stalingrad battle, was telling me that during the census after the war, one person identified himself as Polynesian. And can you imagine that the results of the census read that there are millions of Ukrainians, Russians, and single Polynesian. So find those counters like that, those fair people who could count your votes in the same manner. Okay, dear colleagues, one more question. Next question, please. Second row. Floor is yours. I'm Denis Machovsky from Novosibirsk. While you asked for feedback, and just a month ago, in the biggest municipality last month, a communist won the elections. So that's a piece of feedback for you. And you asked also to look back into the history. So for 120 years of Novosibirsk history, perhaps you can think of some name of those people who we could be proud of, and who can be associated with liberals since, as you said, if you look at Stalingrad, it's not as good in liberal terms as Yaroslav. Perhaps living in Novosibirsk, we don't know those people who can deserve our attention. Thank you, Novosibirsk. First of all, as you may know, a communist who won the elections, he was in coalition with other parties, and you should have taken advantage of Vanya Starikov's presence here. He was here before lunch. He is from Novosibirsk, and he participated in the elections, and he could tell you the truth. And I don't know how that new mayor is doing. Is he working fine, or? But he will be under pressure, I understand. And should we take liberal subculture before the revolution, then Novosibirsk at that time was just a new city without most fundamental basis, and he didn't represent a significant part of liberal Russian liberalism. Novosibirsk belongs to the second half of the 20th century, and the future belongs to that. But you should really explore some other area. Can you recall that famous novel, The Bison, about Timofey Frysovsky, the academician? So he was a genius in science, but he was also a true liberal in the way he thought, and I think the majority of academicians in the Siberian academic institutions, they can really be explored as liberals. You can really evolve as a liberal even in Stalin concentration camp, but they were exceptions. And the true scientists, true researchers, they do realize what freedom is. And I can really think and expect some more interviews with such bisons in science. I'm certain that they are reluctant to go into politics, but and it's very hard to talk them into looking into politics. But anyway, we have to try. Otherwise, we will have superstructure, but not the basis. It's a very good idea. I visited Novosibirsk frequently, and I can really hope that something can be done there in this direction. So thank you very much. Okay, colleague, please share your opinion with us. Good morning, I'm Alexey from Rostov-upon-Don. Can I ask a provocative question? Just hypothetically imagine that you become a president of the country or minister of education. What would be your first steps? Well, it's not that hypothetical, and for me to become a president, you should vote for me. Have you ruled out such an opportunity? If you have, then we'll have another type of dialogue. About 3 years ago, I wrote your book, and an idea came to me. Why you never ran for some positions? I did, and actually at the convention of the SPS party, I gained some 1/3 of all the votes. I was competing with Mr. Nemtsov, although I never carried out any electoral campaigns. So I left the party, and Mr. Nemtsov stayed there. Ivan Starikov also was nominated for that position. Probably he could also could have also made a good chairman of the party. But I don't think that we are. It is relevant for us to run for any elections now. And for me, it's better to help younger generations to understand things. And it's very important, to know when to leave. When people stay in power for too long, when they are the second, third term, it's good. But when you are in opposition and you also stay in opposition for several terms, it's not normal. You should know when to leave. Even at the recent elections, opposition could have done much better, but we failed to work together and perform well. But anyway, thank you for your question. And my liberal subculture, for the people who really look at such sentiments, and we are trying to look for the people who share our interests. Where are you from? I'm from Rostov. Actually, I came to your city about 3 years ago. You mean Rostov-upon-Don? Yes. Greatest city for liberal traditions, starting from outstanding legislatures of the 4 state dumas before the revolutions. Cossacks, many of them, and all the way to great publishers, and who published a lot of very useful things. And for the so-called White God movement, Rostov made a great contribution, and your potential is very high. I think there are some 5 cities who are very rich in liberal traditions. In your city, I spoke for 2 days, and I delivered 4 lectures, and we were so much surprised because we just tried to make a hint of their ideas, but those ideas were taken immediately by the youth, by the middle class, and by the professors of university, and there was a lot of feedback. So those are very good centers of power for liberals, and we should really think how we can combine and unite all our efforts. You made a point about elections, and certainly people would like to vote for some dignity, and we know well the history of people who are in power, but we are not aware of the history of the honest and fair people who can really deserve being elected. And it's time for in-depth work, and it's time to do a lot of civic enlightenment and education. So I would like to wish greatest viability to the school's students. You can lose in politics, but if you lose in education, it leads to a disaster, to catastrophe. As Dr. Berdaev put it, it would lead the people to barbaric times. The last question, colleagues, before dinner. Mr. Liberal from Kaluga, the floor is yours. That gentleman is our credit of so long. I'm Evgeny Yefremov from the Kaluga region. I'm a graduate of 2011. And you made a point about the Minister of Education. So I represent a faction of popular education. Last year, Richard Pipes wrote a paper on Mr. Ovarov, and I participated in that paper. I sent the materials to Richard Pipes. In 1849, Uvarov had to leave the position because he didn't agree with the Tsar's opinions, but he had already made a great contribution to the cause of education. So in 1837, the charter of the Russian Academy of Sciences was drafted, and that charter lasted till 1926. So even the Bolsheviks, were guided by that charter. And Richard Pipes wrote that Dr. Uvarov, Minister Uvarov, made the greatest contribution for Russian education and culture, and both the high schools, elementary schools, and higher education were streamlined with that. And it's my comment in favor of Minister Uvarov. Well, you will meet with Andrei Zubov very soon. He is going to come and attend your class, and he is a great proponent of Count Uvarov. And he thinks he's not a great contributor to education, but he is also a great liberal. And that was a great scandal in his magazine because half of the editorial board didn't agree with them, with his statement. And I agree that it was quite a prominent person, and when he had to leave, it was a result of a conspiracy of some indecent persons. So I agree with you, and Uvarov made a great contribution to the Russian culture. But to some subtle category of culture. And unlike Zankrevsky, I refer to him as the undoubtedly liberal person. And if you know a lot about Mr. Uvarov, I can just give you another point. He was the member of Arzamas, the cell of Zhukovsky, Vyazemsky, and young Pushkin belonged to that cell. But quite consciously, he migrated to the conservative position, saying that high education does not lead Russian people to any good. If a Russian person is enlightened, they will kill each other. If it's like arming a child with a knife. That was his motivation, and he was asked by his friends. He stayed enlightened himself, but he was extremely conservative in terms of enlightenment and education. So I understand that a strong person. But anyway, you are going to have the lecture by Mr. Zubov. I disagree with him on many occasions, but still since you asked that question, I'd like to convey my best greetings to Kaluga. And I was told that there is a person from Kondrovo. Ah, you are from Kondrovo. Just recall Fyodor Augustovich Stepun, whose jubilee is coming this year. So read what Stepun said about Uvarov, roughly the same what I did. That exhausts our Q&A session, dear colleagues, and I should say that Alexey Alexeyevich, when he is speaking here, he always speaks from the position of a true liberal, and with him you start seeing some good examples of liberalism in Russian history, and I would like you to thank the expert. Just one word, because we're all hungry and everything has already been said. Alexey, despite the fact that everybody is hungry, specifically Andrei Alexandrovich, but I would like to say it out loud. Some of us keep on thinking about civic education, civic enlightenment in our free times, since we are under such a pressure, so that you should really understand what you are doing in your life yourself first. And Alexey, I would like to give you our sincere thanks for what you are doing, and we all know that what to do really, but listening to you once again, we get convinced that we are on the right track. And again, expressing my personal views, but things you are doing are very fruitful, very instrumental to all of us. So in that project that it is at issue, which is entitled "What is Civic Enlightenment?", I think you should really make your contribution. And can I ask you to do so? Thank you. Okay, so happens that it's not only myself who is hungry. Okay, have a nice meal, and after 1 hour